So what happens when your wife's paycheck is bigger than yours? I mean, she's pulling in that dough and you're sitting at the kitchen table wondering if your ego is about to file for divorce before you do. Because here's the thing. Women who out-earn their husbands represent 16% of marriages in America, but they account for 42% of all divorces. So today, we're going to talk about it, with data, with honesty, and with zero interest in making either side the villain, because this is not a man versus woman issue. This is a marriages versus pride issue, and pride has been winning for way too long. So let's start with what the actual numbers say, because the numbers are wild. So according to Pew Research, the share of marriages where women earn as much or more than their husbands, they've tripled over the last 50 years. In 1972, wives were the primary or equal breadwinner in only 16% of marriages. Today, that number is 45%, nearly half. I mean, that means if you're in a room with 10 married couples, almost 5 of those women are matching or out-earning their husbands right now. Now, that is a massive cultural shift that happened in, just one generation. You see, our grandparents had clear roles, right? He works, she stays home. Nobody questioned it. But the game has changed, and most couples are trying to play the new game with the old rules. And when the rules don't match the reality, well, everything starts to glitch. It's like, trying to run a 2026 app on a 1995 computer. The screen's freezing, nothing loads, and instead of, updating the system, most couples just, keep restarting the same broken machine and hoping that, it magically works this time. The University of Chicago did a study and found out that wives who out-earn their husbands actually do more housework, not less. Let that sit there for a second. She's working longer hours, right? Bringing home a bigger check, and then coming home and doing what? More of the cooking, more of the cleaning, more of the laundry. Why? Well, because researchers found that she's trying to compensate, right? She's trying to soften the blow to his ego by being like,
look, I still do everything at home too. Please don't feel weird about this.
Now, she's literally working overtime at home to make sure that her success doesn't threaten his identity. Now, that sounds exhausting, and honestly, well, no woman should have to shrink her success to protect a man's ego. And no man should have an ego so fragile that his wife's paycheck feels like a personal attack. And when I say all this, I speak in general, right? I don't mean 100% of every single man is this way, or that 100% of women, out-earning their man is doing this. I'm just sharing studies and data, so don't be that person in the comment section saying,
my wife out-earns me and I'm not like that.
Or,
I out-earn my husband and he does the chores.
Again, nothing I say applies to 100% of the people. I'm only speaking in general. Okay, real quick. Now, if this video is already making you think differently, well, then go follow me on Instagram. I post daily reels and stories over there that most of them never really make it here on YouTube. Now, I promise your feed will thank you. Well, and so will I. So I'll leave a link to my Instagram down in the description below and on the pinned comment as well. Now, let me get into the part of the video that nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to. The American Sociological Review published a study that found that men who are completely financially dependent on their wives are 3 times more likely to cheat. And female breadwinners are the least likely group to be unfaithful at only 1.5% per year. So the woman is out-earning him, outworking him at home, staying loyal, and the man is the one that's stepping out. That doesn't sound like a relationship problem to me. That's an identity problem. And I say that as a man who wants men to do better. You see, when your sense of self is built entirely on being, the provider, and that role gets challenged, well, some men don't know who they are anymore. And instead of doing the internal work to figure it out, they go looking for validation somewhere else, somewhere that makes them feel, I don't know, like a man again. So what's the actual solution here? Because I don't, just make these videos just to throw stats at you and then, me peace out and walk away. I believe that the solution is simple and difficult at the same time. Now, men, your value as a man is not determined by a number on a paycheck. It never was. Your grandfather, our grandparents might have believed that. Society might have told you that, but it was always a lie. Your value is in your character, your integrity, your presence, your ability to lead with love. A man who is secure and who he is will never be, threatened by a woman who is successful in what she does. Those two things can coexist beautifully in the same house and in the same bed and at the dinner table. Her winning, it doesn't mean that you're losing. And if it feels that way, well, the problem is not her. The problem is the scoreboard in your head that should have been thrown away a long time ago. And women, hear me out on this too. You should never have to apologize for your success. You should never have to dim your lights so someone else's, insecurity doesn't catch fire. But you also can't ignore what's happening. If your partner's struggling with the dynamic, the worst thing you can do is shame him for it. The best thing you can do is create space for him to talk about it, without judgment. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. Now, that verse, it doesn't say one piece of iron is bigger than the other. It says they sharpen each other. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Two people making each other better, right? Not two people keeping score of who makes more. The couple who survives a shift are the ones who, stop competing and start collaborating, who stop measuring their worth against each other and start measuring against the life that they're both building together. Now, gentlemen, her success is your success. And women, his support is your foundation. And the moment that you understand that, well, the paycheck, it stops being a threat and it starts being a tool. And tools don't break marriages. Egos do. Now, if this made you see your relationship differently, even for a second, then please do smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already and send it to someone who needs to hear it. Whether it's a friend, a couple that someone who's quietly going through this right now and doesn't have the words for it yet. Send them this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.